On the day my husband passed away, I did nothing about the $17 million inheritance, or about the. As I walked to my car in the Phoenix heat, that folder stayed on their table. But in my purse was something they had no idea existed. Something that was about to change everything. Have you ever been dismissed in your own life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The room went still after the lawyer said, "There are no remaining distributions assigned to you." Then someone coughed. Not nervous, satisfied. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. I counted the ceiling tiles and measured the distance to the door. 12 tiles. 15 steps. One lifetime erased with the shuffle of papers. Have you ever sat in a room where everyone knew something you didn't? Where the silence felt heavier than your own heartbeat? That's where I found myself on March 18th, 3 days after burying my husband of 30 years. The mahogany table stretched between us like a courtroom bench. Marcus, my husband's business partner, sat with his legs crossed, expensive suit pressed sharp enough to cut glass. Janet, the distant cousin who showed up to exactly 2 family gatherings in 3 decades, clutched a leather purse like it contained state secrets. The lawyer, their lawyer, I realized too late, slid a thick folder across the polished wood. My name wasn't on the cover. Hell, my name wasn't anywhere. Mrs. Chen, the lawyer continued, his voice smooth as desert sand, your husband made very specific provisions for his assets. The trust has been established according to his final wishes. Final wishes. Like he'd had a choice when his heart gave out at Phoenix General at 4:27 a.m. on a Tuesday. I opened the folder anyway. Page after page of legal language that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Properties I'd helped buy. Investments we discussed over morning coffee. Bank accounts I'd contributed to for decades. All of it flowing to someone else. Marcus cleared his throat. Linda, we know this is difficult. David wanted to make sure you were taken care of, but he also had business obligations to consider. Business obligations. That's what 30 years of marriage gets reduced to when you're sitting across from vultures in $1,000 suits. The house, of course, has a provision, Janet added, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. You can stay for 6 months while you adjust. 6 months. In my own home. Like I was some kind of houseguest who'd overstayed my welcome. I closed the folder without reading the rest. The room was too quiet, too careful, too choreographed. These people had been planning this conversation while I was still picking out my husband's funeral suit. I'll need copies, I said, my voice steady as winter morning. Of course, the lawyer replied, but he didn't move to make copies. We'll have them sent over. That's when I knew. When you have to ask for copies of documents about your own life, something's wrong. When people who barely knew your husband suddenly control everything he built, something's very wrong. I stood up, smoothed my black dress, and walked those 15 steps to the door. Behind me, I heard whispered conversations starting before I'd even reached the hallway. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been married to a man who built a $17 million real estate empire from nothing. You don't live with someone that driven, that careful, that suspicious of handshake deals, without learning a few things about keeping records. As I walked to my car in the Phoenix heat, that folder stayed on their table. But in my purse was something they had no idea existed. Something that was about to change everything. Have you ever been dismissed in your own life? Treated like you were invisible while people divided up pieces of your world? Comment below and tell me about it, because what happened next proved that silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means you're gathering ammunition. 3 days earlier, I'd been a wife. Now I was apparently nobody. The drive home from that lawyer's office felt longer than the 30-mile stretch from Phoenix to Scottsdale should take. Every red light gave me more time to think, and thinking was dangerous territory right now. Our neighborhood looked the same as always. $1-million houses sitting behind perfect lawns, palm trees casting afternoon shadows across streets that never saw a pothole. But something felt different now, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. Like maybe I didn't belong here anymore. I pulled into our driveway, my driveway, I corrected myself, and sat in the car for a full 5 minutes. The house David and I bought in 1998 looked exactly the same. Same red tile roof. Same desert landscaping he'd insisted would save us money on water bills. Same front door we'd painted sage green because I thought it looked welcoming. But walking through that front door felt like trespassing. The silence hit me first. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty house, but the hollow echo of a space that suddenly felt too big. David's coffee cup still sat in the sink from that last Tuesday morning. His reading glasses were folded on the kitchen counter next to a stack of mail I hadn't touched. I opened that mail now, mostly because I needed something to do with my hands. Electric bill. Property tax statement. Renewal notice for his business insurance. Normal life stuff that felt completely foreign now. Then I saw it. A letter from First National Bank. Account status change notice, printed in bold letters across the top. Dear account holder, it began. This letter confirms the removal of Linda Chen as an authorized user on account ending in 4792. This change was processed on March 15 at the request of the primary account holder. March 15. David died on March 12. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Someone had removed me from our joint account after my husband was already dead. Someone with access to his information, his signatures, his authority. I called the bank's customer service line and got transferred 4 times before reaching someone who could pull up our account. Ma'am, I show that change was requested in person with proper identification and authorization forms, the representative explained. The request was processed according to standard procedures. What kind of identification? I asked. I can't release that information over the phone, but I can tell you the change was made at our downtown Phoenix branch. Downtown Phoenix. Where Marcus kept his business accounts. Where David had never banked in his life. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at that letter. David had been dead for 3 days, and already someone was moving pieces around the chessboard. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly when to do it. The smart thing would have been to call a lawyer right then. The careful thing would have been to start documenting everything, taking pictures, making lists. Instead, I did something David had taught me during 30 years of real estate deals. I got curious instead of angry. Because angry people make mistakes. Curious people ask better questions. And I had a lot of questions. If someone tried to edit you out of your own life on paper, would you speak up now, or wait and watch? Comment: silence is not equal to surrender, if you'd have stayed seated but started taking notes. The house echoed with 30 years of we that had become I overnight. Even the coffee maker seemed too big. That first week after the lawyers' meeting blurred together like watercolors in rain. People brought casseroles I couldn't taste and said things like, call if you need anything, while avoiding eye contact. The kind of help that makes you feel more alone than being actually alone. I moved through our routines out of habit. Make coffee for 2, pour out the second cup. Check his side of the bed for his phone before remembering he wouldn't need it. Start to tell him about something I'd seen on the news before talking to empty air instead. But the house wasn't just echoing with memories. It was filling up with problems. On Thursday, the landscaping crew showed up to maintain our yard like they had for the past 5 years. Except when they tried to charge the usual account, their payment bounced. Mrs. Chen, the crew leader said, hat in hand, the card we have on file was declined. Do you have another one we can use? I tried our joint credit card. Declined. Our business credit card. Declined. That afternoon, I called every bank where we had accounts. Same story at each one: ma'am, you're no longer listed as an authorized user on this account. By Friday, I couldn't buy groceries with my own credit cards. But here's the thing about being married to someone who built an empire from nothing: you learn that money flows like water, and someone had just redirected the stream. I started making lists. Every account, every credit card, every automatic payment that might bounce. Every bill that would come due. Every financial connection that tied me to the life David and I had built. The picture that emerged made my stomach drop. Someone hadn't just removed me from bank accounts. They'd systematically untangled me from every financial thread in our shared life. Like pulling a single strand from a sweater until the whole thing falls apart. Saturday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by bank statements and bills when my phone rang. Unknown Phoenix number. Mrs. Chen. This is Patricia from Desert Mountain Properties. I wanted to personally express my condolences about Mr. Chen's passing. Desert Mountain Properties. One of the commercial real estate firms David worked with regularly. Thank you, Patricia. That's very kind. I also wanted to let you know we received the instruction to transfer the Morrison Street property portfolio to the trust. The paperwork is moving through our system now. Morrison Street. The strip mall we bought together in 2019. The one I'd helped him negotiate, helped him finance, helped him manage. I'm sorry, I said, gripping the phone tighter. What instruction? The transfer instruction from Mr. Marcus Webb. He said the trust needed to take immediate control of the properties for tax purposes. Marcus again. Moving pieces while I was still figuring out the game board. Ever had someone change your life without telling you? The water was getting deeper, and I was just starting to learn how to swim. I wasn't looking for secrets when I opened his desk drawer. I was looking for stamps. David's home office had always been his private space. Not off limits, just his. The place where he spread out blueprints and made phone calls about deals I only heard half of. Where he kept his important papers in a filing system that made sense to exactly one person in the world. But stamps seemed harmless enough. I needed to mail thank you cards to people who'd sent flowers, and the kitchen drawer where we usually kept them was empty. The top drawer of his desk held the usual suspects: pens, paper clips, business cards from people whose names I didn't recognize. The second drawer was deeper, hanging files full of property documents and contracts. Normal business stuff. The bottom drawer stuck. I pulled harder, and it came free with a screech that sounded loud enough to wake the neighbors. More files, but these were different. Personal stuff mixed with business papers. Our marriage certificate tucked between mortgage documents. Photos from our anniversary trip to Sedona last year right next to tax returns. That's when I felt it. Something taped to the underside of the drawer. A small USB drive, held in place with medical tape like David was hiding medicine he didn't want anyone to find. My laptop was in the kitchen, and it took 3 tries to get that drive to read properly. When it finally opened, I found myself looking at folders labeled with dates going back 5 years. Wills_original_drafts, insurance_policies_all_versions, trust_documents_questions, property_transfers_notes. I clicked on the wills folder first. What I saw made me push back from the table so hard my chair hit the wall. 17 different versions of David's will, saved with dates and timestamps. The earliest one, from 2019, named me as the primary beneficiary of everything. Every asset, every property, every investment account. But as the dates got more recent, my name started disappearing. First from some properties. Then from investment accounts. Then from nearly everything except the house and a small bank account with barely enough to cover 6 months of expenses. The final version, dated March 10th, 2 days before David died, removed me from everything except that one account and a 6-month house provision. But here's what made my hands shake: the file creation timestamps. The original will from 2019, created March 15, 2019 at 2:47 p.m. The second version from 2020, created March 20, 2020 at 11:23 a.m. The third version from 2021, created February 8, 2021 at 4:15 p.m. Every version, created on the date it was supposed to be written. Except the last one. The final version, supposedly written March 10th when David was conscious and alert, showed a file creation timestamp of March 15th at 6:22 p.m. March 15th. 3 days after my husband died. The same day someone removed me from our bank accounts. Someone had been editing David's will after he was dead. I opened every other folder on that drive. Insurance policies that had been changed. Property transfer documents with my name crossed out in red ink and margin notes that said, "Discuss with MW," in handwriting that definitely wasn't David's. MW. Marcus Webb. Miss one hidden clue, lose everything. Subscribe so nothing gets past you. My name was there in the early drafts, then neatly crossed out. In the margin, discuss with MW. MW was making decisions about my life while my husband couldn't even speak for himself. Screenshot those dates in your mind. File created, March 15th, husband died. March 12th, someone was editing his will after he was gone. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She asked how fast I could get downtown. Rebecca Chin, no relation, despite sharing my married name, was the kind of lawyer David would have respected. The kind who answered her own phone at 7 a.m. and got straight to business without wasting time on small talk. I'd found her number through a Google search for probate attorney Phoenix, and left a voicemail at 6:30 in the morning after a sleepless night staring at that USB drive. By 7:15, she was calling me back. "Mrs. Chin, I've handled cases like this before. How quickly can you get me copies of everything you found?" Everything? The USB drive contents, the bank letters, any communication you've had with the people involved. And I need you to stop communicating with them immediately. No phone calls, no text messages, nothing. Why? Because every conversation you have without representation is evidence they can use against you later. And based on what you've told me, they're already 3 steps ahead. We met at a coffee shop on Central Avenue, the kind of place where lawyers and accountants grab breakfast before court. Rebecca was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of focused energy that made you trust her before she even spoke. She spread my documents across a corner table like she was assembling a puzzle. Bank statements, will drafts, property transfer papers, timestamps, margin notes. Everything laid out in chronological order. "Tell me about Marcus Webb," she said without looking up. David's business partner for about 7 years. They bought and sold commercial properties together. Marcus handled most of the paperwork side while David focused on finding deals. So Marcus had access to David's business accounts, signing authority, knowledge of his assets? Yes, but... And this cousin, Janet? She lives in Tucson. Barely stayed in touch except for Christmas cards. I was surprised she even showed up to the funeral. Rebecca nodded, making notes on a yellow legal pad. Classic setup. Inside partner with access, outside relative with clean hands. Very efficient. Efficient? For stealing an inheritance, yes. She looked up from the documents for the first time since we'd sat down. Mrs. Chen, what I'm seeing here isn't grief profiteering or opportunistic greed. This is systematic asset transfer executed by people who knew exactly what they were doing. She pointed to the timestamps on the will drafts. These changes weren't made in a hurry after your husband died. They were planned and executed over months, maybe years. Your husband's illness gave them the opportunity to accelerate their timeline. So what do? First, we file an emergency motion to freeze all asset transfers pending probate review. Today. Then we get a forensic accountant to trace every transaction made in the last 6 months. And then we prepare for them to fight back. They'll fight back? Rebecca gathered up my documents and slid them into a manila envelope. Mrs. Chen, when people steal $17 million, they don't give it back quietly. She looked at the metadata and said 2 words, forensic audit. The way she said it made it sound like a declaration of war. Would you trust a stranger with your life's biggest fight? Sometimes the person who believes your story is the person you need most. The teller's screen went blank. Then she looked up with an expression I'd never seen, confusion mixed with fear. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to get my supervisor." I'd walked into First National Bank at 9 a.m. sharp, Rebecca's emergency court filing tucked in my purse like a loaded weapon. The plan was simple: present the preservation order, freeze all accounts connected to David's estate, and watch Marcus scramble. The plan lasted exactly 12 minutes. Mrs. Chen, the branch manager said, sliding into the chair across from me, I need to inform you that we received instructions this morning to liquidate the remaining assets in the Chen family trust accounts. What time this morning? The request came in at 7:47 a.m. Rebecca had filed our motion at 8:15 a.m. Someone was moving fast. Who made the request? Mr. Webb, as the authorized trust administrator. The funds are being transferred to the trust's primary account at Desert Financial. Desert Financial. Where Marcus did his personal banking. I handed her the court order. This document freezes all asset transfers pending probate review. Nothing moves without court approval. She read it twice, made 3 phone calls, and spent 20 minutes typing on her computer. When she finally looked up, something had changed in her expression. Ma'am, the transfer has been stopped. All accounts are now frozen per this court order. My phone started ringing before I made it to the parking lot. Linda. Marcus's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. We need to talk. Hello, Marcus. What you're doing is going to hurt everyone involved. David wouldn't want this kind of conflict. David wouldn't want his will forged after he died. Silence on the other end. Long enough for me to unlock my car and get inside. I don't know what you think you found, he said finally, but you're misunderstanding the situation. David made his intentions very clear in his final months. Clear enough to require editing after he was dead? Linda, you're grieving. You're not thinking straight. Let's meet tomorrow and work this out like adults. Through our lawyers. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You don't understand what you're messing with. The threat was quiet but unmistakable. The kind of threat that confirms you're on the right track. Marcus, I said, starting my car, I understand more than you think. I hung up and drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from adrenaline. For the first time since David died, I felt like I was moving forward instead of getting pulled under. They're counting on you staying quiet. Subscribe. Your voice matters more than their threats. That afternoon, Rebecca called with news that made everything clear. Linda, they tried to empty 6 more accounts this morning. All stopped by the freeze order. We caught them in real time. Marcus's voice cracked when he said, You don't understand what you're messing with. But I was starting to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The forensics expert held the signature up to the light. This wasn't signed by someone in a hospital bed. Dr. Sarah Martinez ran the document analysis lab that Rebecca recommended, the kind of place where handwriting becomes evidence and timestamps tell stories. Her office looked like a cross between a science classroom and a detective's desk, microscopes next to file folders, magnifying glasses scattered across tables covered with papers. She'd been examining David's final will amendment for 3 hours, and I could tell from her expression that she'd found something significant. Mrs. Chen, I need you to look at this under the microscope. The signature that was supposed to be David's looked different when magnified 20 times. The pen pressure was inconsistent, the letter formations shaky in places where David's handwriting was usually steady. This signature shows characteristics of either extreme physical distress or guided hand assistance, Dr. Martinez explained. The D in David has been traced over multiple times, which suggests the signer was having difficulty completing the letter formation. Could that be from his illness? Possibly. But here's what's interesting. She switched to a different document under the microscope. This is a signature from a property transfer document dated 2 weeks earlier. Same time period, similar health conditions, but look at the difference. The earlier signature was weak but consistent. Shaky from illness, but clearly David's hand forming each letter. The final will signature looked like someone had been moving his hand for him. There's more, she continued, pulling up images on her computer screen. The ink analysis shows 2 different pen types were used on this document. The main text was signed with a standard ballpoint pen. But these initials in the margin were signed with a gel pen. She zoomed in on David's initials next to 3 different paragraphs, the paragraphs that removed me from the will entirely. If someone signs a document in one sitting, they use the same pen throughout. The fact that these initials were added with a different pen suggests they were added later, possibly by someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "How's it going with Dr. Martinez?" Getting answers, I texted back. "Mrs. Chen," Dr. Martinez said, "I want to show you the most damning piece of evidence." She pulled out a calendar and spread it across her desk. March 10th was circled in red. "According to the document, your husband signed this will on March 10th at 2:30 p.m. But the hospital records Rebecca provided show that your husband was undergoing emergency dialysis from 1:15 p.m. to 4:45 p.m. that day. He was unconscious. Under sedation, yes. There's no way he could have signed anything during that time period." She handed me a manila folder thick with analysis reports, photographs, and technical findings. This document was either signed before March 10th and backdated, or it was signed by someone else entirely. Can you prove that in court? Mrs. Chen, I've testified in over 200 cases involving document fraud. This is one of the clearest examples I've ever seen. That evening, I sat in my kitchen reading Dr. Martinez's report page by page. Technical language that boiled down to one simple truth: someone had forged my husband's signature on the document that stole my inheritance. But knowing it and proving it were 2 different things. 3 witnesses signed at 2:47 p.m. Hospital logs show visitors were cleared by 2:30 p.m. due to emergency procedures. The timing was impossible, but the signatures were there. Predict, will the timestamps hold up in court? Because tomorrow, we were about to find out who those witnesses really were. I found our first will in the safe, written in 1997. His handwriting was steady then, and my name was everywhere. The combination to David's home safe was our wedding anniversary, June 14, 92. He'd never been creative with passwords or security codes, always said the best hiding place was in plain sight. What thief would guess that a real estate millionaire would use his wedding date for everything? The safe was behind a landscape painting in our bedroom closet, and I'd only opened it twice in 30 years, once to put my grandmother's jewelry inside, once to retrieve our passports for a trip to Mexico. Now I was looking for ammunition. The documents inside told the story of our life together in chronological order. Marriage certificate, birth certificates for the children we never had, insurance policies, property deeds, and wills. Lots of wills. The earliest will, handwritten on yellow legal paper, was dated June 1997. David's handwriting was strong and clear, every letter formed with the precision of someone who took important things seriously. I, David Chen, being of sound mind and body, leave everything I own to my wife Linda Chen, the only person who believed in me when I had nothing. Everything. Not most things, not some things, not things after business obligations were met. Everything. I found 8 more wills in that safe, each one typed and notarized as David's business grew more complex. But even as the legal language got more sophisticated over the years, one thing stayed constant: I was the primary beneficiary of everything he built. Until 2021. The will from January 2021 was the first one that mentioned Marcus by name. Not as a beneficiary, but as my trusted business partner who should assist Linda in managing the commercial properties. By June 2021, Marcus was listed as co-executor of the estate. By December 2021, Marcus was given discretionary authority over business asset distribution. By March 2022, I was reduced to spousal provisions as determined appropriate by the executor. Someone had been working on David for years, not months. But here's what they didn't know about the letter. Tucked behind the most recent official will was a handwritten note dated February 2023, just weeks before David's final hospital stay. Linda, if something happens to me, remember that everything we built was we, not me. Don't let anyone tell you different. The safety deposit box at Commerce Bank has copies of everything important. Box 247, your maiden name plus my birth year. I love you. D. Safety deposit box. Commerce Bank. Box 247. I called Rebecca immediately. Linda, slow down. What safety deposit box? David left me a note. There's a safety deposit box at Commerce Bank with copies of important documents. I need to get there before they close. Don't go alone. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. Rebecca, what if they've already been there? Then we'll know how deep this goes. This single line proves intent. The note was in David's handwriting, with my name mentioned specifically, dated just weeks before he died. Which detail would you highlight? Because tomorrow, we were about to discover whether David's final message to me had survived Marcus's paper chase. Rebecca's text was 2 words, motion granted. I didn't celebrate. I exhaled. The emergency hearing had lasted 47 minutes. I'd sat in the back of courtroom 4 at the Maricopa County Superior Court, watching Rebecca present our evidence to Judge Patricia Williams while Marcus's lawyer objected to nearly every sentence. But numbers don't lie, and timestamps don't bend to legal arguments. Judge Williams had studied the forensic reports, examined the hospital records, and listened to 30 minutes of back and forth about document authenticity before making her decision. Based on the evidence presented, she'd said, I find sufficient grounds to question the validity of the March 10 will amendment. All asset transfers are hereby frozen pending a full probate investigation. Marcus's lawyer had requested an immediate appeal. Denied. He'd requested a 60-day delay for additional evidence gathering. Denied. The judge scheduled a full evidentiary hearing for 6 weeks out and made it clear that nobody was moving any money until this got sorted out properly. I was in my car when Rebecca called. Linda, we won the first battle. But you need to be prepared for them to escalate. What do you mean? Marcus just spent 47 minutes watching his plan fall apart in public. People like that don't walk away quietly. She was right. By the time I got home, there were 3 voicemails on my landline. The first was from Marcus. His voice was different now, less controlled, more desperate. Linda, what happened in court today helps nobody. We can still work this out privately. Call me back. The second was from Janet, the distant cousin who'd barely spoken at the funeral. Linda, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Why don't we all sit down for lunch tomorrow and clear this up? I have some things David told me that might change your mind about fighting this. Janet had something David told her? In 30 years, I'd heard my husband mention Janet exactly twice, both times when discussing whether to send Christmas cards to extended family. The third voicemail was the most interesting. Mrs. Chen, this is Andrea Walsh from Channel 12 News. We understand you're involved in a significant probate dispute involving allegations of document fraud. We'd like to get your side of the story. The media had found out. Which meant someone had contacted them. That evening, while I was heating up leftover soup for dinner, my doorbell rang. A delivery driver handed me an envelope with my name handwritten on expensive stationery. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy cardstock. You are cordially invited to attend a memorial celebration honoring the life and legacy of David Chen. Saturday, April 15, 2 p.m., Desert Mountain Country Club. Accept the meeting or avoid the trap. A tribute, curated by the person who tried to erase me from David's will. What's your move when your husband's business partner wants to throw him a public memorial party while stealing his money? They had coffee waiting and settlement papers printed. I brought a recording device and Rebecca. The Desert Mountain Country Club looked like every other overpriced golf course in Scottsdale. Too much green grass in a desert, too many luxury cars in the parking lot, too many men in polo shirts talking loudly about deals that made them sound more important than they actually were. Marcus had reserved a private dining room overlooking the 18th hole. The table was set for 4 people with coffee service and a plate of pastries that nobody was going to touch. Linda, thank you for coming, Marcus said, standing when Rebecca and I walked in. He was wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his smile looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. Janet was already seated, clutching the same leather purse from the lawyer's office. She looked nervous in a way that suggested this wasn't her idea. Before we begin, Rebecca announced, setting a small recording device on the table, I'm recording this conversation for documentation purposes. Marcus's smile tightened. Is that really necessary? Given the circumstances, yes. We sat down, and Marcus immediately slid a folder across the table. Linda, we've prepared a settlement offer that we think addresses everyone's concerns fairly. I opened the folder. The number at the bottom of the first page made my breath catch, $500,000. This represents a generous settlement for any misunderstandings about David's final wishes, Marcus continued. You'd keep the house, of course, and this additional sum should provide comfortable security for your future. Misunderstandings? Rebecca asked. The probate process can be complicated, Janet interjected, speaking for the first time since we'd arrived. David always said he wanted Linda taken care of, but he also had business obligations. This settlement honors both. Rebecca pulled out her own folder and placed it next to theirs. Let's discuss those business obligations. According to our forensic analysis, your alleged will amendment was signed while Mr. Chen was unconscious in a hospital bed. Marcus's composure cracked just slightly. I resent the implication. The signature was forged, Rebecca continued. The witnesses were never present. The timestamps don't match the hospital records. This isn't about misunderstandings, Mr. Webb. This is about fraud. That's a serious accusation, Marcus said, his voice getting harder. It's a serious crime. The room went quiet except for the sound of golf carts outside and ice melting in water glasses nobody had touched. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Linda, before we continue, there's something you should know. He showed me a text message thread. Numbers I didn't recognize, but the content made my stomach drop. David struggled with memory issues in his final months, Marcus said quietly. He was concerned about making decisions that might not be in your best interest. He asked me to help protect you from complicated financial situations. The text messages were supposedly from David, talking about confusion, medication side effects, worry about leaving me with business problems I couldn't handle. But I knew something Marcus didn't. David never sent text messages. He could barely figure out how to answer his phone, let alone type complete sentences with perfect punctuation. Interesting texts, I said, closing the folder with the settlement offer. Especially considering David never learned how to text. Marcus's face went completely blank. Linda, Janet said quickly, maybe we should take some time to think about this offer. Rebecca slid the settlement folder back across the table. Try again. And next time, don't insult our intelligence. If you're not prepared, they win. Subscribe to stay 3 steps ahead of people who think you're just a grieving widow. Screenshot that number, $500,000. It proves they know they're guilty, and it's exactly $17 million short of what they stole. Mrs. Linda. The voice on the phone was shaky. I was there when they made him sign. I have photos. It was 8:30 on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after our disaster meeting at the country club. I was drinking coffee and reading Rebecca's motion for expedited discovery when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. This is Linda Chen. My name is Maria Santos. I took care of Mr. David in his final weeks. Maria. David's home healthcare aide during those last difficult months when his kidney failure meant daily dialysis and constant monitoring. I remembered her, quiet, competent, kind to David when his frustration with his failing body made him impatient with everyone else. Maria, of course. How are you? Mrs. Linda, I need to tell you something. About the papers Mr. David signed before he died. My kitchen suddenly felt too quiet. What about them? I have pictures. On my phone. Mr. Marcus, he came to the house when you were at the grocery store. He brought papers and said Mr. David needed to sign them for taxes. What kind of papers? Will papers. Trust papers. Mr. David, he was so tired that day. The dialysis had been difficult. He could barely hold the pen. I set down my coffee cup with hands that were starting to shake. Maria, what did you see? Mr. Marcus, he guided Mr. David's hand. He said it was okay, that it was normal to help when someone is weak. But Mrs. Linda, Mr. David kept asking where you were. He said he didn't want to sign anything when you weren't there. But he signed anyway. Mr. Marcus said it was just paperwork, that you already knew about it. He said if Mr. David didn't sign that day, there would be problems with the government, with taxes. Mr. David got scared. Maria's voice was getting stronger now, like telling the truth was giving her confidence. Mrs. Linda, I took pictures because something felt wrong. Mr. Marcus saw me and got angry, said I shouldn't be taking photos of private business. But I already had them on my phone. Maria, are you willing to testify about what you saw? I have been thinking about this every day since Mr. David died. It was not right, what happened? Mr. David was confused, scared. He trusted Mr. Marcus. Where are you now? I work for another family in Paradise Valley. But Mrs. Linda, there is more. After Mr. David signed the papers, Mr. Marcus made phone calls. I heard him talking to someone about finishing the paperwork and making sure everything was clean. Finishing the paperwork. Making everything clean. Like David's signature was just the first step in a longer process. Maria, I need you to meet with my lawyer. Can you do that? Yes. But Mrs. Linda, I am scared. Mr. Marcus, he knows where I work now. He called my new employer and said I was unreliable, that I stole things from clients. Character assassination. They weren't just covering their tracks, they were trying to destroy anyone who could expose them. Maria, my lawyer will protect you. But we need those photos. That afternoon, Maria sat in Rebecca's office and showed us 12 photos on her phone. David at his kitchen table, struggling to hold a pen. Marcus guiding his hand across signature lines. David asking questions Marcus wouldn't answer. David looking confused and frightened. Is photo evidence enough to prove coercion? Because Maria's pictures showed something worse than fraud, they showed elder abuse in real time. Their lawsuit arrived by courier at 6 a.m. Mine was filed by 9 a.m. I was making coffee when the doorbell rang, which should have been my first warning. Nobody makes social calls before sunrise unless they're delivering bad news or court papers. The courier was apologetic but professional. Linda Chin. I need you to sign for this. The envelope was thick, expensive paper with a law firm's logo I didn't recognize. Daniels, Morrison and Associates, printed in gold letters across the top. Inside, 23 pages of legal language that boiled down to one simple message: Marcus and Janet were suing me. Frivolous litigation. Harassment. Intentional interference with estate administration. Big words for, shut up and go away. But the part that made me laugh, actually laugh out loud in my kitchen at 6:15 a.m., was their damage claim. They wanted $200,000 from me for emotional distress and reputational harm. Emotional distress. From the people who'd been stealing my inheritance while I planned my husband's funeral. I called Rebecca before I'd even finished reading. They filed first, she said after I read her the highlights. Smart move. Makes them look like the victims. So what do? We file our response today. And Linda? We're not just defending anymore. We're going on offense. Rebecca's office at 8 a.m. looked like a war room. Documents spread across every surface, timeline charts taped to the walls, boxes of evidence stacked in corners. She'd been working all night. Here's what we know, she said, handing me a cup of coffee that tasted like it could wake the dead. Marcus Webb has power of attorney documents dated 3 days after your husband's death. Janet Rodriguez has signed affidavits claiming she was David's primary caregiver during his final weeks, which contradicts hospital records showing she visited exactly once. So they're lying. They're lying badly. And when people lie badly in legal documents, they give us weapons. She showed me our countersuit. fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit theft, forgery. Each count backed up with timestamps, witnesses, medical records, and bank statements. We're asking for full restitution of all transferred assets, plus punitive damages, Rebecca explained. And we're requesting an emergency hearing to review all transactions made since your husband's death. Will it work? It'll definitely get their attention. She wasn't kidding. By noon, 3 different lawyers had called her office demanding to schedule settlement discussions. By 2 p.m., Marcus had left 4 voicemails on my home phone, his voice getting more strained with each message. "Linda, this is getting out of hand," the final message said. "We're all adults here. We can work this out without making it ugly." Too late for that, I thought. They'd made it ugly the day they decided to erase me from my own life. Rebecca filed our paperwork at 3:47 p.m. The clerk stamped it, officially making us plaintiffs instead of just victims. At 4:15 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Chen? This is Judge Patricia Williams, clerk. The judge has reviewed the emergency motions in Rodriguez v. Chen and Chen v. Webb. She's scheduling a hearing for Monday morning at 9 a.m. Monday. 4 days away. Both parties must appear with counsel," the clerk continued. "All relevant documents and evidence must be submitted by Friday at 5 p.m. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, looking at my reflection in the dark window. 4 months ago, I was a grieving widow. Now I was a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit. Ever been forced into a fight you didn't start but had to finish? The judge scheduled emergency hearing for Monday. Winner takes everything. The judge asked Marcus to demonstrate my husband's signature. His hands shook holding the pen. Monday morning came too fast and not fast enough. I'd spent the weekend going through David's papers one more time, looking for anything Rebecca might have missed. By Sunday night, I could recite account numbers and property addresses like poetry. The courthouse was bigger than I expected, all marble columns and echoing hallways that made every footstep sound important. Rebecca met me at the security checkpoint wearing a navy suit that meant business and carrying a briefcase that looked like it could hold state secrets. "How are you feeling?" she asked as we walked toward courtroom 4B. "Like I'm about to throw up." "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." Marcus and Janet were already seated at the defendant's table when we walked in. Marcus wore the same expensive suit he'd worn to that first lawyer meeting, but it didn't fit him the same way. He looked smaller somehow, like he'd shrunk inside his clothes. Janet kept checking her phone and avoiding eye contact. Their lawyer, a tall man with silver hair who probably charged more per hour than most people made in a week, was shuffling through papers and whispering urgently to his clients. Judge Patricia Williams entered at exactly 9 a.m., and the room went quiet. She was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd heard every lie lawyers could tell and wasn't impressed by any of them. "This is an emergency hearing regarding competing claims to the estate of David Chen," she began. "I've reviewed both motions and the supporting evidence. Let's start with the basic question: whose signatures are legitimate?" Rebecca stood first. "Your Honor, we have forensic evidence that multiple documents were created after Mr. Chen's death, including will amendments and power of attorney transfers." She handed the bailiff a stack of papers. "These are the metadata reports showing file creation dates, signature analysis comparing known samples to disputed documents, and hospital records confirming Mr. Chen was unconscious during times when he allegedly signed legal papers." The judge studied the documents for what felt like forever. The only sound in the courtroom was the air conditioning and Marcus's lawyer shuffling papers. "Mr. Daniels," Judge Williams said to their lawyer, "I'm looking at a power of attorney document allegedly signed by Mr. Chen on March 14. According to these hospital records, Mr. Chen was sedated and on a ventilator that entire day." "Your Honor, my clients have sworn affidavits." "I can see that. What I can't see is how a sedated man signs legal documents." She looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Webb, would you please approach the bench?" Marcus stood slowly, his confidence from that first lawyer meeting completely gone. I have 3 examples of Mr. Chen's signature from bank documents created before his illness, the judge continued. I'd like you to show me how you would sign his name. Your Honor, I don't understand. It's a simple request, Mr. Webb. If these signatures are legitimate, you should be able to demonstrate the technique Mr. Chen used. Marcus took the pen with a hand that was visibly shaking. He started to write, stopped, started again, then put the pen down. I can't, he said quietly. You can't replicate the signature of a man you claim gave you power of attorney 3 days after his death? No, Your Honor. The courtroom was dead silent. Janet was staring at her hands. Their lawyer was writing notes frantically, probably calculating how quickly he could withdraw from the case. Judge Williams called recess after seeing the hospital footage. Marcus's lawyer was already packing up his briefcase before we'd even left our seats. Strongest evidence isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's a shaking hand that can't forge what it's been claiming was real. Agree? Marcus didn't confess in court. He confessed in the parking garage, thinking nobody was listening. After the judge called recess, Rebecca and I took the elevator to the parking garage in silence. The hearing had gone better than expected, but lawyers never celebrate until the gavel comes down for the final time. How long until she makes a decision? I asked as we walked toward her car. Could be days, could be weeks. Judges don't like being rushed, especially in cases involving this much money. We were unlocking Rebecca's car when I heard familiar voices echoing off the concrete walls. Marcus and Janet, 3 rows over, having what sounded like an argument. Rebecca put her finger to her lips and pulled out her phone. The recording app was running before Marcus spoke his next sentence. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Marcus was saying, his voice carrying across the empty garage. We moved too fast. I told you we should have waited. Waited for what? Janet's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. She was asking questions, going through his papers. We had to liquidate the assets before she figured it out. Liquidate the assets. Like our marriage was just a business deal that needed to be dissolved. The signatures were supposed to be perfect, Marcus continued. You said your guy could match anything. He can match anything when he has time. You gave him 3 days and a stack of hospital documents. What did you expect? There was a pause, then Marcus again. How much did we get out before the freeze order? About 60%. The Morrison Street properties, most of the investment accounts, the Phoenix warehouse deal. Maybe $12 million total. $12 million. Gone in the 4 months since David died. And the rest? Locked up tight. That lawyer of hers isn't playing around. I could hear footsteps, car doors opening and closing. Their voices getting quieter as they moved away. If the judge rules against us, we're looking at felony charges, Marcus said. Fraud, forgery, maybe conspiracy. I'm not going to prison for this, Janet. Nobody's going to prison. We'll settle, pay her something to make it go away, and disappear. Pay her with what? Her own money? Their car engine started, and the conversation was over. But Rebecca's phone kept recording for another 30 seconds, just to be safe. Well, Rebecca said, sliding her phone into her purse, that simplifies things considerably. Back in the courtroom, Rebecca submitted the recording as new evidence. Marcus's lawyer requested an immediate conference with his clients. 15 minutes later, they returned with a settlement offer. Full restitution of all transferred assets. Written acknowledgement of misconduct. And Marcus agreeing to cooperate with any future investigations into forged documents. The settlement papers included one line I insisted on: misconduct acknowledged and regretted by all parties. Choose justice or choose revenge? I chose justice, but I made sure the public record would show exactly who they were dealing with. I didn't keep all the money. I kept what mattered, my husband's true intentions restored. 3 months after the settlement, I was sitting in the same lawyer's office where this whole mess started. Different lawyer this time, my lawyer, and different papers spread across that mahogany table. Estate planning documents. trust agreements, foundation paperwork. But most importantly, David's will. The real one. The 2019 version where my name appeared exactly where it belonged, everywhere. The Chen Family Foundation is officially established, Rebecca said, sliding the final documents across the table for my signature. $12 million in assets dedicated to helping families navigate inheritance disputes and elder abuse cases. $12 million. The exact amount Marcus and Janet had stolen before we caught them. And the other $5 million? I asked. Remains in your personal trust, as David originally intended. You're comfortable with that arrangement? I nodded. $5 million was more than enough for one person to live on. The other $12 million would do more good helping families who couldn't afford lawyers like Rebecca, who couldn't pay for forensic experts, who couldn't fight back when vultures circled their grief. The Foundation's first case came through our website within a week of going live. An email from someone in Tucson: my wife died 6 months ago, and suddenly I don't exist on paper. Her daughter from her first marriage has power of attorney and is selling our house. The lawyers say there's nothing I can do because I'm not blood family. I forwarded it to Rebecca with a note. This sounds familiar. By the end of our first year, we'd handled 37 cases. Widows erased from wills. Adult children cut out of trusts by new spouses. Elderly parents pressured into signing over property to caregivers who weren't what they seemed. Every case was different. Every case was exactly the same. The Foundation office was in downtown Phoenix, 6 blocks from the courthouse where I'd watched Marcus's hands shake while trying to forge my husband's signature. Some days I'd walk over there during lunch, sit in the public gallery, and watch other people fighting for their rights in front of judges who'd heard it all before. Most days, though, I stayed in our office, helping people understand that being dismissed doesn't mean being defeated. That staying quiet while you gather evidence is different from staying quiet because you've given up. We kept David's home office exactly the way he'd left it, but now it was my office too. His desk still held his papers, but mine were there alongside them. His filing system, expanded to include Foundation cases and legal precedents. The USB drive that started this whole thing sat in a small frame on the windowsill. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder, sometimes the most important evidence is hidden in the most ordinary places. A sealed envelope tucked behind an old ledger, sometimes the proof you need is right where someone hoped you'd never look. What would you preserve for a future you may never see? Justice isn't just about winning your own fight, it's about making sure others can win theirs. They didn't interview me on television. They didn't need to. The legal precedent spoke louder than any headline. 1 year after that first terrible meeting in the lawyer's office, I was back in Phoenix family court. Not as a defendant this time, but as a witness in someone else's case. A woman whose husband had died suddenly, whose stepchildren were claiming he'd promised them everything, whose grief was being weaponized against her by people who saw dollar signs instead of a human being. I testified for 20 minutes about red flags, about document timestamps, about the difference between legitimate estate planning and systematic erasure. About how staying quiet doesn't mean staying helpless. The judge ruled in her favor. Full restoration of assets. Misconduct finding against the stepchildren. Legal fees paid by the losing parties. Afterward, outside the courthouse, the woman hugged me like I was family. I read about your case online, she said. That's how I knew to look for the timestamps. That's when I realized this was never really about the money. It was about making sure other people knew the warning signs, knew the questions to ask, knew that document dates matter and signatures can lie but metadata doesn't. The Chen Family Foundation now had offices in Phoenix, Tucson, and Las Vegas. 43 cases closed successfully. 18 pending. 230 families helped with document review and legal referrals. Marcus moved to Oregon and went back to selling residential real estate. Small houses, small deals, small enough to stay under the radar. Janet moved back to Tucson and apparently got religion, based on the Christmas card she sent with a handwritten apology that arrived 2 years too late to matter. I still lived in the same house David and I had bought in 1998. Same red tile roof, same desert landscaping, same sage green front door that looked welcoming. But now it felt like mine in a way it never had before. Not because I'd inherited it or fought for it, but because I'd chosen to stay. Some mornings I still made coffee for 2 out of habit. 1 cup for the memories of the life we'd built together. 1 cup for the life I was building now. The foundation work was good work. Hard work, but good. Every case reminded me that the legal system could be a weapon or a shield, depending on who was holding it and how well they knew how to use it. David would have approved. He'd always said the best business deals were the ones where everybody won except the people trying to cheat the system. I kept a small framed photo of him on my desk at the foundation office. Not a formal portrait, but a snapshot from our last anniversary trip to Sedona. He's laughing at something I'd said, coffee cup in one hand, real estate listings in the other. Still working, even on vacation, but happy about it. Below the photo, a small plaque with the inscription I'd chosen for the foundation, in memory of David Chen, who taught me that silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Open sky, cool air, the story finally written in a hand that won't be erased. They don't erase you when you know your worth. Comment below, what line from this story will stay with you? Thanks for following Linda's journey. Subscribe for more stories where quiet strength beats loud manipulation. Hit that like button if you believe in fighting for what's rightfully yours. Drop the one line you'll carry with you forever. What does it take to reclaim your place in your own story? Share your thoughts below.